Big news coming in on the Pakistani boat incident. Headlines today has accessed details of transcripts intercepted by the NTRO on the 31st of December. The transcripts are of a conversation between two boats that originated from Karachi at 9 that morning. The transcripts suggest that two boats purportedly carrying explosives were in contact with the Pak Maritime Agency and the Pakistani Army. This is crucial evidence that Headlines today has been able to access. There are now transcripts that suggest that these two boats that originated from Karachi, that started from Karachi on the morning of the 31st, were in touch with Pak Maritime Agency and the Pak Army. Let's get a word from our Strategic Affairs Editor Gaurav Sawant, who's with us on the phone line. Gaurav, this could be incriminating evidence against Pakistan.
Well, the intelligence agencies, the NTRO and the Coast Guard together are now joining the dots. And what appeared to be initially just a suspicious boat now appears that there were two boats that were operating in tandem. And the intention was not smuggling, but to reach either the Gujarat coast or to transfer either men or material to reach Gujarat. So was this on the lines of 26/7? We're still not sure. But Coast Guard sources are telling Headlines today that this is not happening as a rogue, outfit operation. But the intercept seems to indicate that they were also in touch with Pakistani maritime agencies. And that is something which points to a very sinister role then. Because once again, this is indicative of Pakistani state involvement. But at this stage, once again, sources saying it's extremely preliminary. Intelligence is still being collated, and the calls that were being made, even on the satellite phone, were being rerouted, and one rerouting was happening through Thailand. So all of this is still being collated, Simi.
All right, Gaurav, I want to ask you one question. Are there any details available about the location of this second boat? Did it return to Karachi, or is it still in the Arabian Sea?
It is feared taking advantage of bad weather. The second boat may have slipped through the security dragnet on its way back to Karachi. This is what Coast Guard sources seem to indicate at this stage. But the fact that other Coast Guard vessels have also been rushed to this area is indicative of the fact that this search is still not over. In fact, initially the fear was that was this just diesel or some kind of inflammable material that caught fire on board that Pakistani vessel initially yesterday. Now sources saying that some of the material that has been picked up, some of the debris that has been picked up, it will be analyzed, of course, but it is indicative of some kind of explosives that were stored on board, and a fishing vessel will not have explosives on board. So there is something which is, there's far more to it than meets the eye. That is what sources indicate, but they're still piecing together these little pieces of the jigsaw.
All right, Gaurav, please stay on with us. We also have with us strategic expert Sushant Sareen, who's with us on the phone line. Thanks so much for speaking to Headlines today, Mr. Sareen. How do you view these developments? Still preliminary at this stage, but it appears that there were two boats that left Karachi on the morning of the 31st of December, and both these boats were in touch with the Pak Maritime Agency and the Pak Army, and the conversations suggest that the boats may have been carrying explosive material.
Look, we had some information, some reports of transcripts even yesterday. But as Gaurav is saying, this thing still needs to be pieced together because there are still some gaps and some questions which can be raised about this entire affair. It's not my case that I'm doubting what has happened, but one would really like a little more clarity. Of course, if the kind of transcripts we are now getting to hear about, if those are true, then of course it adds yet another dimension to this entire crisis. And then this whole business of a non-state actor carrying out an operation on its own to spoil the pitch between India and Pakistan, I think all of that goes up in smoke. And then it is a non-state actor working at the behest of a state actor, and that changes the entire complexion of this entire plot. Of course, what this plot was is still unknown. Whether this was a kind of a commando operation of the sorts we saw on 26/11, or it was something else. It was essentially smuggling of weapons or explosives to some of these guys on the coastline, somewhere on the coastline in India. We really don't know that as of now. Hopefully, if these guys had been caught alive, perhaps we would have learned a lot more, but that hasn't happened. And as for that second boat, while there are these reports of a second boat, I am a little surprised as to how the second boat could have escaped, unless, of course, it was miles away from the first one, and they were not in, direct kind of a contact. So I think there are a bit of a question mark around that as well. Perhaps many of these things will become clear when, this entire conspiracy is pieced together with the help of intercepts and whatever information the Coast Guard guys, when they come back, they bring with them. That will, help us make a much more firmer analysis of what exactly transpired on the high seas.
All right, Mr. Sareen, stay on with us. We're also being joined by Mr. Uday Bhaskar, Director, Society for Policy Studies. Thanks so much for speaking to Headlines today, Mr. Bhaskar. How do you view these developments?
In the light of the most recent inputs that have come into the public domain, which suggests that there was communication between this particular boat or the vessel and somebody in the Pakistani establishment, as also I am told that there is some linkage with Southeast Asia, clearly points to what you might call as a much larger game plan. And from yesterday evening, when we were discussing this again on your channel to where we are now, I think we are getting a little more clarity about the scale of this entire operation. And yesterday we used the word illicit in terms of the vessel and the fact that it was carrying suspicious cargo, which resulted in the self-explosion. But based on the current input, I would go along with what Sushant Sareen has just been saying on your channel, that there is more to it than meets the eye. And if we are able to get greater clarity about the communication linkages, I think it poses a very serious challenge to India about the intent. To me, as an analyst, it doesn't really matter whether the scale of the operation was similar to Mumbai or it had a different kind of objective. The most operative part is the fact that the deep state in Pakistan or the establishment in Pakistan is embarking upon this kind of exercise or this kind of an operation, which at the end of the day is adversarial to India's security interests and the stability in the region. So it does, I think, change the complexion over the last day from yesterday to today based on the most recent intercepts or what the NTRO has put out into the public domain. I think this, to my mind, is very, very significant. The communication contact between the crew of the vessel and whoever was controlling them or directing them from within the Pakistani deep state, as is normally referred to. Seema?
All right, Mr. Bhaskar, stay on with us. I want to go back to Sushant Sareen. Mr. Sareen, you were talking about the second boat as well, and you said that it's probably too early to sort of figure out whether or not it's managed to enter India, whether it was able to dock along the Indian coast, or whether it was forced to return to Karachi. Also, the fact that the Indian Coast Guard had been alerted and was keeping an eye out for these boats, did not spot that second boat. I want to ask you if you think that probably Indian security agencies started celebrations way too early. We heard ministers from the government congratulating the Coast Guard, congratulating the Navy, and saying that they managed to avert a major terror strike. But probably that congratulations coming a little too early.
I think the ministers were probably, most of the ministers who were making these statements were probably as ill-informed as most of us were at that point in time. The thing is that this incident happened on the night of 31st and 1st, right? We got to know about it yesterday. This is when it came out in the public domain. Perhaps the ministers got to know a little earlier than what most of us did. Actually, even intelligence agencies tend to get breaking news from the news channels itself and not from their own sources. So perhaps even the ministers got to know when at the same time as we got to know. So I wouldn't put too much in store of what the minister said or did not say. But the thing is that if this incident happened on the night of 31st and 1st, then obviously, and the news was broken on the 2nd, then obviously people had tried to piece together the whole thing. It was not a kind of something which happened in this one instant and were leaking this news the same time. So you probably were searching for that boat at that point in time. If they had information on the second boat, and after destroying the first one, or after the first one destroying itself, they started celebrating, then I think there was something seriously wrong with the guys who were there on the spot. But if they were looking for the second boat and they haven't been able to trace it in the last 2 days, I don't think they're going to trace it anymore.
All right, Mr. Sushant Sarin and Uday Bhaskar, thanks so much for speaking to Headlines today. Crucial developments on the Pak boat story. Now, there are intercepts that have been accessed by Headlines today that suggest that there were 2 boats that left Karachi that morning and may have been in touch with Pak Maritime Agency and the Pak Army.